In this powerful continuation, we begin to see what it truly means to be chosen by God and strategically positioned for purpose. Just as Esther found herself in a place she did not fully understand, many of us walk through seasons that seem uncertain, yet are divinely orchestrated. Behind the polished walls of the Grant Foundation, a young and seemingly unknown woman, Kereen Bennett, is awakening to the influence she carries. But hidden behind power and politics stands the real strategist, Haman, the force operating behind Senator Grant, orchestrating quiet attacks to silence opposition. Yet his greatest threat has never been public resistance. It is truth revealed at the appointed time. Part 4 reveals that being chosen is not about comfort. It is about calling. It shows that God places people in specific environments, relationships, and defining moments not by accident, but by design. Like Kereen, there comes a moment when silence is no longer an option, and purpose demands obedience. This next chapter will stir your spirit, challenge your perspective, and prepare your heart for the defining decisions ahead. Welcome to Part 4, where purpose awakens, courage is tested, and destiny begins to speak. Her phone vibrated in her hand, as if it sensed the urgency rising in her chest. She didn't hesitate. "Uncle Michael." He didn't greet her. His voice was already serious. "Kereen, tell me what happened." "They removed me from the briefing. My access is gone. People are avoiding me. I think—" He cut in gently but firmly. "Kereen, he's not watching you anymore." She froze. "He's moving to erase you." The words landed heavier than anything she had felt so far. Uncle Michael continued, calm but precise. "This is the phase before discrediting or termination, possibly before legal threats. He's isolating you so that when you speak, no one believes you." Kereen sat down slowly. Her mind replayed every moment from the conference room. The eye contact, the correction, the power shift. She had crossed a line, and Haman had decided she could no longer exist inside the system. Across the city, Uncle Michael had not returned to his normal routine after the last phone call. He sat in his living room, Bible open, eyes closed, praying, and as he prayed, clarity came like a flash of light in darkness. He saw the pattern immediately: isolation, documentation, narrative shaping. Michael opened his eyes. This is a containment strategy. He had seen it before in political circles, in corporate warfare, in legal battles designed to crush whistleblowers before they spoke. His voice was low but firm. "Haman is moving faster than I thought," and time was running out. In his quiet office, Haman reviewed an internal report, access logs, file histories, employee activity. He had ordered a silent sweep of the system to trace everything Kereen had touched. He leaned forward, scanning the data carefully, and then he paused. There, buried in the metadata, were traces he hadn't expected, file paths that led back to restricted executive folders, transfers routed through accounts only he and Grant authorized. His jaw tightened. He realized that in trying to contain Kereen, he had exposed himself. Back at her desk, Kereen stared out at the city skyline. She felt fear settling deeply into her chest. However, the fear she felt was not being wrong, but the fear of what Haman was willing to do to protect himself and his corruption. She whispered under her breath, "For such a time as this." But now, the words felt different, because she now clearly understood that this was no longer about discovering the truth. It was about surviving long enough to reveal it. Meanwhile, in the executive wing, Senator Alexander Grant began to feel something he had not felt in a long time: unease. Haman had been unusually present, advising constantly, bringing documents for urgent signatures, pushing timelines, replacing staff quietly, including Kereen. Grant flipped through a file Haman had just asked him to sign, but before signing he paused. "Where is Kereen?" he asked casually. Haman's answer came quickly. "She's been reassigned to support roles, not critical to this phase." Grant nodded slowly, but his instincts stirred. Kereen had been exceptionally critical, and now she was absent. Grant leaned back in his chair. "Haman, what exactly is happening?" The question hung in the air longer than either man expected. Because now, Grant was not asking for advice, he was asking for truth. And Haman realized the walls were beginning to shift not from Kereen, but from within. The office had emptied hours ago. Lights were off across most of the floor, leaving only the quiet hum of climate control and the distant glow of emergency exit signs. Kereen remained at her desk, not because she had work to finish, but because she had work to begin. Her hands rested on the keyboard for a long moment before she moved. She wanted to be precise, and so every click had to be intentional. She opened the internal archive again, not the full folders this time, but specific documents she had memorized by name. She did not download anything in bulk because that would be traceable. Instead, she copied fragments: a page here, a table there, a signature, a transfer log, a relocation map, small pieces. These were harmless on their own, but damning when assembled. She opened a private document on her personal device, deliberately offline, untouched by the Foundation's network. Title: Timeline. She began to type with calm precision. Dates, meeting names, who said what and who signed what. When her access changed, when HR called her in, this was no longer note-taking. It was preparation. She was not just collecting evidence. She was constructing a defense against an accusation she felt forming before it was spoken. If they attempted to frame her, this record would answer. If they tried to silence her, this record would outlive the silence. She encrypted the first set of entries and transmitted them to a secure external location Uncle Michael had arranged earlier that evening. Her heart did not race. Her breathing did not shift. It felt strangely familiar, like stepping into a role she had somehow been prepared for, long before she knew why. Across the hallway, in a dark executive office, Haman stared at a screen filled with system activity logs. Something was off. Too many small file openings in areas no one had touched for weeks. He leaned closer. His jaw tightened. She's moving. He did not know how yet, but instinct told him the threat was no longer theoretical. He picked up his phone. "Run a deeper audit. I want to access logs for the last 72 hours, every department." His voice was calm, but his eyes were not. The next morning, HR received a quiet directive from Haman. "Advance the documentation process. I want formal concerns recorded by the end of the week." There were no accusations, only careful groundwork. Phrases were drafted that could later justify termination. Subtle language designed to paint Kereen as unstable, disengaged, and uncooperative. A narrative was forming before any event had occurred. Haman was not reacting. He was preparing a legal pathway to remove her before she could act. And beneath the strategy, something darker had taken root. This was no longer about protecting the Foundation. This was about stopping her. Back at her desk, Kereen finished sending the second encrypted set. She paused and looked at the city outside the window. She realized that Haman was trying to contain her, but he did not know the truth because piece by piece, the truth was leaving the building. Uncle Michael did not sleep that night. The house was quiet, but his mind was not. He sat at the small dining table with a notebook open, reading glasses low on his nose, phone resting beside his hand. Names were written on the page, people he had not called in years, relationships formed across decades of community work, politics, and quiet advocacy. He understood with clarity that when this truth breaks, it will not break gently, and Kereen must not be standing alone when it does. He picked up the phone. The first call went to a journalist he trusted. This journalist was known for careful investigations and protected sources. "I may have something soon," Michael said quietly. "But when it comes, it must be handled with precision. No leaks. Only facts." The journalist did not ask questions. Understood. The second call was to a legal contact. Michael explained the scenario without names. Hypothetically, if someone inside an organization discovers financial misconduct and that organization begins documenting them without accusation, what is happening? The lawyer did not hesitate. They're building a case to discredit or terminate before exposure. Classic containment. Your person needs documentation, witnesses and external timestamps immediately. Michael closed his eyes briefly. They're already doing that. Good. Then they're smarter than they think. The third call made Uncle Michael pause before dialing. A former politician, someone who knew Senator Grant from years before power, before influence, before this foundation existed. They spoke carefully, and as the conversation unfolded, Uncle Michael learned something important. Grant had not always been surrounded by men like Haman. Haman had entered his circle later, during expansion, during ambition, during international funding. Uncle Michael wrote one sentence in his notebook: "Grant may not know," and that changed everything. Across the city, in a high-rise office, Senator Grant remained at his desk long after his staff had gone home. An unshakable unease settled over him. Something wasn't right. He could feel it, though he couldn't yet name it. A single desk lamp cast a narrow pool of light over stacks of archived project folders he had specifically requested. One by one, he flipped through financial summaries from past development initiatives, documents he had once approved without a second thought. But now, with a slower gaze and a quieter, more discerning mind, the details pressed in differently. The numbers told a troubling story. Costs that escalated too quickly. Emergency reallocations that appeared too convenient. Consultancy fees are repeated across multiple projects, almost rhythmically. His brow tightened as he turned to the authorization pages. There it was, his signature, and beside it, again and again, Haman's. Grant leaned back in his chair, the weight of realization settling heavily on him. This was no longer a routine review of past progress. He was uncovering a pattern. He remembered asking once, casually, why certain reports never reached him directly. Haman smiled. "Too detailed. I filtered what you need." At the time, it had sounded efficient, helpful even. But now, in the stillness of the office, it sounded like control. Another name surfaced in his mind. Efficient and principled Kereen. Questions started to go through his mind. Why was she suddenly removed and replaced by someone Haman recommended? Grant's unease grew heavier. He reached for his phone, then stopped. He wasn't ready to confront Haman yet. He needed to understand more first. And without realizing it, Grant had begun walking toward the same truth Kereen had already found. Back in her apartment, Kereen had not turned on the television. She had not checked messages. She had not eaten since morning. She sat on the floor beside her bed, Bible open, eyes closed, not asking God what to do because she already knew. She was asking for the courage to do it. Her mind started to replay everything: the prophetess's voice, Vanessa's warning, the files, the map of her grandmother's village. Tears slid quietly down her face. This was no longer about corruption, but about the people who stand to lose. Miles away, Uncle Michael closed his notebook and looked upward and whispered, "Lord, keep her steady. The storm is about to start." Because he knew something Kereen was only beginning to feel. The moment of action was approaching, and when it came, there would be no turning back. The morning air carried a salty tang as Kereen stepped out of her car. The familiar coastal district stretched before her. It was the same place she had visited during her summers, now reduced in official documents to a cold phrase. Relocation support. Children ran between modest houses. Elders carried baskets along narrow paths, and women gathered in small clusters, exchanging stories about crops, market prices, and everyday life. The village breathed in its own rhythm, unaware of the decisions being finalized in polished offices, unaware of the signatures already written in ink, unaware of the quiet storm forming in glass towers. Kereen's chest tightened as she took it all in. This was memory. This was livelihood. This was life. She stepped forward slowly, her eyes tracing the details she once took for granted. The worn fences, the scent of the sea woven into everything, the unspoken resilience etched into the people. She found Vanessa waiting under the shade of a mango tree. Vanessa looked up as Kereen approached, her expression a gentle blend of concern and warmth. "You look like someone who's carrying the weight of the ocean," Vanessa said softly. Kereen exhaled and sat beside her, lowering her voice as though the wind itself might be listening. Then she told her everything. She spoke of the isolation at work, how conversations had shifted, how access had quietly narrowed. She explained HR's subtle pressure, the kind that never leaves fingerprints but always leaves an impact. She laid out Haman's schemes with clarity. The manipulation, the control, the careful positioning, the stolen files, the growing risk. Vanessa listened carefully, nodding, her hands folded over her knees. "Kereen," Vanessa said at last, her tone calm but firm, "you've already survived what most would crumble under. You are not here by accident. You have the position, the access, and the courage." She paused, letting the words land. "But you cannot fight this alone. You must use strategy, not just bravery." Kereen absorbed the words, letting them settle. Strategy, courage, faith. Later, Kereen followed Vanessa to a small clearing outside the village, where prophetess Miriam awaited. The prophetess, silver-gray hair wrapped in white, eyes wise and luminous, looked directly at Kereen. She reached out, resting her hands lightly on Kereen's shoulders. "My child, the hour has come. Fear will not guide you, courage will. What you carry is heavy, yes, but it is not yours alone. Stand for the ones who cannot. Speak for the truth that cannot wait. You are placed for this moment, and the unseen is already with you." Kereen bowed her head, letting the prayer wash over her. As Miriam's words echoed in her mind, she felt a tangible shift in her spirit. The fear she had felt was replaced with calm determination. "The hour of exposure approaches," Miriam continued, "and you will not walk it alone. Listen, plan, and act. But do not hesitate when the time comes. Stand." Kereen rose slowly, her hands brushing her skirt. She looked out over the village and remembered the prophetess's prayer from months ago, Vanessa's warning, and the files she had already secured. Everything was converging to this exact moment. That evening, Kereen stood alone on a hill overlooking the village and the coastline. Papers and notebooks tucked carefully beside her. Laptop closed for now. Every step she had taken, every file she had copied, every encrypted message she had sent, every cautious move in the office had been preparation. Every quiet hour in prayer, every fast, every conversation with Uncle Michael and Vanessa had led her here. Back in the city, Uncle Michael closed his notebook after a long day of calls. The journalist confirmed they could handle the evidence. The lawyer verified legal protections. And the former political associate had agreed to quietly advise and mediate with Grant if needed. Uncle Michael leaned back, eyes closed, whispering, "Lord, keep her steady. The storm is coming." Meanwhile, Haman's presence loomed in both the city and office. He had no idea Kereen had already secured evidence. He had no idea she had spiritual, strategic, and emotional support. He only knew something was moving against him, And like all men, blinded by fear and hatred, he was beginning to make mistakes. The pieces were in place, the board was set, and the confrontation, like a wave rising on the horizon, was inevitable. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Foundation's main conference room, catching the polished floors and glass walls in sharp, blinding lines. Kereen walked in quietly, her heels clicking softly against marble. Every step was deliberate. She carried no folder in her hands, but she carried the weight of the truth she had prepared to reveal. Haman sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, eyes sharp. He had noticed Kereen's absence from meetings, her careful disappearance from correspondence, and now her quiet return unnerved him more than he could admit. "Good morning," Kereen said, voice steady, calm. Haman's lips twitched. "Ah, you're back. I didn't see your name on the list of invitees." "Yes," Kereen replied. "Senator Grant spoke with me this morning and instructed me to be in all project meetings. It's obvious he was not told the reasons why I was removed or reassigned, so I am back to ensure the work here serves the people it claims to serve. So let's begin." She placed a single encrypted tablet on the table and tapped it lightly. For a brief second, nothing happened. Then the screen came alive. The screen projected a series of documents: financial transfers, budget reallocations, coastal mapping overlays, project labels softened with corporate language, relocation support, urban renewal, development enhancement. But beneath the language was something else: displacement, movement of people, money flowing outward through offshore channels, breaking into fragments across jurisdictions too complex for casual tracing, and Grant's and Haman's repeated and consistent signatures. Kereen did not overwhelm them with everything she had because she understood timing now and was advised not to. So she chose fragments that could not be dismissed individually, but could not be ignored collectively. Enough to raise questions. The murmurs spread across the table. Kereen's voice remained steady. "These documents are part of ongoing infrastructure development reports. They've been compiled over time as part of internal transparency audits I was assigned to review." That word, assigned, was intentionally stressed by Kereen. By now, Haman was already leaning forward. His eyes narrowed, scanning the projection and the intention behind it. "Why?" he said slowly, voice controlled but edged. "Is this level of detail being compiled by your desk?" The room shifted slightly, and a few executives looked between them. Haman continued, sharper now. "These are not standard reporting summaries. These are cross-referenced financial audits, migration overlays, and transfer logs. That is not routine documentation." He paused. Then the question landed. "Are you making accusations against this organization?" Silence followed immediately. Everyone was waiting for Kereen's response. Kereen did not react quickly. She let the silence settle first. "I am not making accusations," she said calmly. "I am presenting verified data that has been compiled through internal systems, cross-checked against publicly filed records, and corroborated with project documentation." She tapped the screen again. Another layer appeared. Timestamps, approval chains, internal routing logs. "This is not an interpretation," she continued. "This is traceable movement of funds and authorization." Her gaze shifted briefly across the room. "Every file here can be independently verified." Haman exhaled slowly through his nose, masking irritation with restraint. "You've compiled all of this independently?" he asked. "Yes," Kereen replied. "And you felt it was appropriate to escalate it to this level without internal clearance review," he pressed. Now his tone had changed. He was no longer questioning data. He was questioning her intent. Kereen recognized the shift immediately. This was no longer about documents. It was about framing her. "I escalated nothing," she said. "I brought forward what is already active within the system. These are existing records, not external allegations." Then she added, carefully, "If there is concern about how these reports were generated, then the concern should be directed toward the integrity of the systems producing them, not the individual reviewing them." That line landed quietly but firmly. Haman's jaw tightened. For a fraction of a second, something sharper flickered in his expression, because he understood that Kereen was not improvising. He leaned back slightly, forcing calm back into his posture. "I want clarity," he said finally, "because from my perspective, this looks less like reporting and more like curated evidence being positioned for a narrative." His eyes locked onto hers. "Is that what this is, Kereen? A narrative?" The room held its breath again. This was the second trap. Kereen did not blink. She simply replied, "If transparency feels like a narrative, then the concern is not with transparency." A pause. "It is with what has not been seen until now." The projection remained steady between them, data unmoving and the evidence unchanged. But the balance in the room had quietly shifted. Haman realized then what was unfolding was not a confrontation he could control in the moment. It was a process already in motion, and Kereen, calm, composed, deliberate, was not presenting accusations. She was opening a door, one that could not be easily closed again. Kereen continued. "This is not about accusations," Kereen said, eyes scanning the room. "This is about facts, about the families, the villages, the lives that are at stake, and about accountability for every signature and every authorization connected to these projects." Haman's hand twitched toward his files, as if to snatch the device. But Kereen didn't flinch. Kereen did not move back. If anything, she stepped forward, just slightly, enough to close the distance Haman had tried to use as leverage. The room tightened again, as if the air itself had recognized the shift. Haman's voice dropped lower, sharper now, stripped of its earlier corporate restraint. "You think you understand what's happening here," he said, eyes locked on hers. "But you don't. You're overstepping." There it was, no longer a question of data or procedure or misunderstanding. This was authority pushing back against exposure. "I understand exactly what is happening," Kereen said evenly. Her voice was not raised. It did not need to be. "And I understand exactly why I was placed here." A brief pause. "For such a time as this." It was spoken like positioning. She turned slightly toward the projection behind her, gesturing calmly to the data still glowing across the screen. "Mr. Haman, you have been handling these matters," she continued, voice steady, precise. "But patterns are clear. Budgets inflated, displacement disguised as development, offshore transfers, signatures authorizing it all." Each phrase landed like a measured weight. She looked back at him directly. "And I have realized you've tried to isolate me, slow me down, remove me from meetings and decision-making, but the truth does not wait for convenience." The room had gone completely still. There was no typing or whispering. Even the air conditioning hum felt distant. Haman's jaw tightened visibly now. A flush of anger rose in his face because something had become clear to him at that moment. This was no longer a negotiation. It was exposure in motion, and worse. He was no longer in control of the narrative. He straightened abruptly. "You will be reported to Senator Grant," he said coldly, voice cutting through the silence. "And I am certain you will be relieved of your position immediately." A pause. Then, with finality, "It would be wise for you to resign before that happens." The threat was not shouted. It did not need to be. It was procedural violence wrapped in corporate language. For a moment, no one responded. Then Haman gathered his papers slowly, deliberately, as if reclaiming authority through motion. "This meeting is adjourned," he said sharply. He did not wait for agreement. He did not seek consensus. He simply turned, and walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft but final sound. No one spoke immediately. A few staff members exchanged whispers. Others looked at Kereen, a mixture of awe and cautious admiration. Kereen paused. "I am not here to destroy anyone. I am here to ensure that what we do with integrity." After a long pause, Kereen finally closed the tablet and stepped back. "I will continue to work here. I will continue to serve the people, but I will not be complicit in what I now know to be wrong, and I will not allow fear to dictate action. For such a time as this, I stand." Kereen breathed deeply, because she knew the game had shifted and that Haman would move, but Kereen had proven what she had been preparing for all along. Over the next few days, the atmosphere inside the Foundation changed. It was no longer the polished, efficient rhythm of a well-oiled political machine. It felt strained, watchful, uneasy. Conversations lowered when Kereen walked past. Staff who once greeted her warmly now offered cautious nods, eyes flicking toward glass offices and half-closed doors. Whispers traveled faster than emails, and everyone knew it. No one knew the details, but they knew the shift. Kereen challenged Haman in a meeting. She presented documents. "She's being investigated. She's about to be removed." The stories changed with each retelling, but one thing remained consistent. Her name was now attached to something serious and dangerous. Yet Kereen did not rush or try to defend herself. She continued her work with measured calm, logging in, reviewing files, attending only the meetings she was still permitted to enter. Her silence unsettled people more than any reaction would have. Upstairs in his office, Senator Grant felt a quiet unease he could not shake. Files lay open across his desk as he revisited reports he had signed months earlier, documents he had trusted without question when the summaries were first placed before him. Now, the patterns disturbed him. Fragments of conversation returned to his mind. Kereen's sudden reassignment, her unexplained absence from key meetings, and, most troubling of all, Haman's unusual insistence on personally managing all communications. Grant leaned back in his chair, fingers pressed together, staring at a signature on a document now flagged for review. His own. Beneath it were budget reallocations, far larger than he remembered approving. He picked up the phone. "Send Haman to my office, immediately." Haman arrived composed but alert. He had expected this, but he had prepared explanations. Grant skipped pleasantries and slid a folder across the desk. "Explain this." Haman glanced down. Financial summaries, approval chains, cross-references. He recognized the compilation style immediately. "Kereen." Grant's voice was calm, edged with suspicion. "I've heard about her reassignment, her removal from meetings. And now I'm seeing reports tied to my signature that I don't remember approving at this scale." He leaned forward. "Now explain to me. Why was she reassigned?" Haman kept his tone even. "She was compiling reports beyond her scope, cross-referencing departments without clearance. It raised concerns about her professionalism and intent." Grant's eyes stayed on him. "Intent?" "She seemed to be building a narrative rather than doing her job." Grant leaned back. A narrative. The same word Haman had used earlier. Now it sounded practiced. Grant tapped the document. "These budgets are far beyond projections. And these relocation programs, I don't remember approving displacement at this scale." Haman's jaw tightened, but his face stayed calm. "Standard development adjustments. Necessary reallocations for progress." Grant didn't reply. The words felt rehearsed. "And the offshore transfers?" he asked quietly. The question hung in the air. Haman paused. "Just a fraction. International partners. Legal funding routes." "You have certainly been getting your share, right? So, why are you acting surprised?" Grant listened, but doubt shifted inside him. Was he being scammed? A thought echoed in his mind. What goes around comes around. The next week began like any other in the glass-walled offices of the Foundation. But for Kereen, nothing was ordinary anymore. Haman had been silent since the conference room confrontation, but his silence was not peaceful. It was a storm of calculation and malice. By mid-morning, HR called her to a small side office. "Performance review," they said politely. There were no accusations. There were no references to the evidence she has. Only subtle critiques, questions about minor delays, and insinuations about teamwork. Every word was measured to pressure and isolate her. Kereen sat calmly, listening. She did not flinch or raise her voice. Every phrase they used only confirmed what she already knew. Haman was escalating. He was laying groundwork for either dismissal, discrediting, or worse. She returned to her desk afterward, feeling neither fear nor panic because she had anticipated this. Her fingers rested on the laptop. She opened her personal document titled Timeline and documented the subtle pressure from HR. Meanwhile, Uncle Michael sensed the movement from afar. A call from the lawyer had confirmed his suspicion. Haman had initiated a classic containment strategy. He prayed fervently, "Lord, protect her. Reveal what he is doing before it becomes irreversible. Guide her steps." Almost immediately, a mental clarity struck him, a vision of Haman's moves, the pattern of escalation, the HR containment, the legal threats he was preparing. Time was running out. Back in the office, Kereen's intuition told her something more was coming. She had learned to read the signs, the sudden quiet, the subtle shifts in HR, Haman's calculated silence. Her phone buzzed softly. A message from Vanessa. "Meeting moved up. Be ready. Community voices are waiting." Kereen smiled faintly. She closed the office blinds, tapped into her encrypted network, and began distributing fragments of evidence to her external secure location. Haman's first direct move arrived mid-afternoon. The HR team submitted a report documenting her supposed minor lapses. Nothing major, nothing that could justify termination immediately, but they had framed it as a pattern, ready to escalate into a legal narrative. Kereen calmly read the report. Every word confirmed what she already knew. She did not react impulsively. Instead, she implemented her countermeasure, timestamped the report in her timeline, encrypted a copy to her external secure location, noted HR names and dates, prepared a neutral, factual summary for Grant and journalist allies. Haman had intended to isolate her, to silence her quietly, but God was working behind the scenes. By evening, Kereen returned home, exhausted in body, but resolute in spirit. She had survived Haman's first aggressive move. She had acted surgically, protecting herself, the evidence, and the timeline. She knelt on the floor beside her bed, Bible open, notes beside her. This time, her prayer was not for clarity, but for alignment and boldness in action. "For such a time as this," she whispered in a steady voice. Her heart was no longer trembling. It was aligned with purpose. We have come to the end of part 4, and what a journey it has been. But this is not where the story settles. This is where it sharpens. Because part 5 promises to be more than a conclusion. It promises to answer the questions that have been quietly building beneath every scene. And here is the truth that must not be missed. The God that Kereen and Uncle Michael serve is the same God we serve. He is not distant. He is not silent. He is not absent even when systems seem corrupt, even when truth is buried, even when it feels like the wrong people are winning. He is strategically and intentionally working behind the scenes. Romans 8:28 reminds us, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to His purpose." That means nothing is wasted. Not the pressure, not the delay, not even the opposition. In the days of Esther, God fought for his people then, and he is still fighting now. So as we prepare for the final chapter, Part 5, pause and consider, how will this story end? Will the corruption be exposed? Will truth finally rise to the surface? Will those who manipulated power be confronted by it? Or will something even deeper unfold? If this story has stirred something in you, don't let it stop here. Like, share, subscribe. Let these modern Jamaican parables travel beyond your screen, into the life of someone who needs hope, someone who needs courage, someone who needs a reminder that God is still moving in the ordinary moments of life. Before you go, leave a comment below. Tell us, what part of this story spoke to you? Because your words may be the very encouragement someone else needs as they quietly fight a battle no one else sees. Stories like this are not just entertainment. They are seeds. Seeds of faith, seeds of truth, seeds of kindness. And in a world that desperately needs light, every seed matters. So let's keep the flame burning. From Jamaica to the nations, let us tell stories that heal hearts, awaken faith, and remind people of one unshakable truth. And remember, sometimes the smallest story can ignite the greatest change. Blessings from Jamaica.